And one of the things I think has always really amazed me about you is that even though, and maybe not even though, because you dropped out of the institution um, at such a young age, you think more critically and more clearly than anyone else I've ever talked to.
Thank you
You
for
know? I mean, so Tiny has come and guest lectured with me at my old graduate school, or as I like to call it, gradual school, because it took me a long time as a poor single mom to get through it.
it.
But it's, I was teaching what was it, multicultural counseling in the family, and I asked Tiny to come in and guest lecture, I think a couple times. Um, and she was just brilliant, not only about working with people in poverty, but also in facilitating the group. And let me tell you, the students at CIIS are not easily facilitated. You know, these are some super smart, mostly from privileged people. And people who come from privilege are just not easily facilitated. They have a lot of objections and misunderstandings and a belief that their voice should always be heard, right? Which is something that poor people, you kind of have to talk them into having a voice, right? Like it's not a thing they're growing up thinking they are due, right?
Right.
But people of privilege grow up with that belief that their voices need to be heard, you know?
At all
So
times.
I have to say, I was just stunned the first time you came and guest lectured at how deftly you managed that class. I was like, what?
Thank you. Thank you, Sue.
So while I'm sure when you were a little girl and you had to drop out of school, it felt, not so easy. I feel like it's what really cultivated your brilliance.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for that. And you're making my mama smile because, part of the whole, and it's funny that you're like diving in a little bit on this because it's an interesting one I don't get to talk about enough. But, at the time I had this whole obscure object of desire, like somehow school was the savior, and it was in a way because we were houseless. And when I'd go to school, I'd get breakfast and lunch and like a sanity moment, and we know that as educators and caregivers, that's real for our youth in poverty. That's the one place, that you can go. That's why it's so deep and difficult on so many levels when you have racist classes, educators, and yeah. But anyway, so I could never go back, and it was really interesting because it wasn't for lack of trying. It was like I didn't have an address, and a lot of school districts then, but even still, won't let you enroll if you don't have a physical address. There's been pushback on that, especially in California. They don't get to do that anymore. But anyway, I didn't have a physical address, but then even more deeply, and I think this was the hardest one of all, because this is where, essentially again, those capitalist white supremacist notions of normal,
Mhm.
right, so often hurt us as poor people, as indigenous people, as in black and brown peoples. And one of the things that had happened at that point is that I had to start being basically a caregiver for my mom. She became disabled after all that trauma. It was the final straw. And I would tell that to my teacher, and with in earnest, and love, and like I thinking she'd listen, right? Instead, she reported me,
Uh,
and yeah, and called the frickin' CPS and the truant officer. And that I just recently did a children's book. I don't know if you saw it, When Mama and Me Lived Outside. It's a
mm-mm.
new, oh, it's a new one.